Within the venerable edifices of the Republic, where influence cascades like vintage wine and riches gleam like polished gold, a profound disquiet begins to stir. Beneath the ostentatious veneer of military triumphs and celebratory parades, countless souls languish in servitude, their identities lost to obscurity, their aspirations crushed beneath the immense burden of an expansive empire. From the blood-drenched arenas where combatants meet their fate to the seemingly infinite expanses of agricultural estates, human beings have been reduced to mere commodities, bartered like sacks of grain and tallied with the dispassion afforded to livestock. Yet, within this colossal apparatus of subjugation, where the powerful prey upon the vulnerable and liberty is an exclusive privilege of the elite few, a potent force awakens. For even the most imposing empires are constructed upon foundations forged by human endeavor, and what mortal hands have erected, mortal courage can dismantle. This narrative chronicles the unfolding of events when the improbable transforms into the inescapable, when humble kitchen implements are repurposed as instruments of liberation, and when those marginalized and dehumanized reveal their possession of the most intrinsically human attribute of all, the indomitable will to be free. Across the wine-dark expanse of the Mediterranean, where the prow of ships cleaves through waves that have borne witness to the ascendance and demise of empires, Roman legions advance with unwavering discipline. Their standards, tipped with burnished bronze, shimmer beneath a sun that observed the immolation of Carthage and the subjugation of Athens, while beneath their hobnailed sandals lies the dust of nations that dared defy the inexorable march of conquest. Despite their numerous victories, despite the prodigious wealth flowing toward the Seven Hills, this republic harbors within its ever-expanding frontiers the very seeds of its own undoing. In the century preceding a Thracian warrior's challenge to imperial authority, the triumphant city itself is reshaped by its very conquests. Campaigns initially conceived as defensive measures against Gallic incursions morph into a systematic dominion over the known world. The silver mines of Spain, laboriously worked by descendants of those who once fought against Hannibal, pour a torrent of wealth into the treasury, financing further military expeditions. The scholarly repositories of Greece surrender their wisdom to Latin speakers grappling with the pronunciation of the names of philosophers whose ideas would revolutionize their understanding of governance. From the smoldering ruins of Corinth to the conquered strongholds of Asia, a human tide flows toward Italian markets, resembling tributaries feeding a colossal river. Gauls, their fair hair marking them as exotic curiosities. Germans, their fierce gazes burning with the memory of freedom. Greeks, whose intellectual prowess renders them valuable educators, all find themselves divested of names, families, and futures, destined to serve masters who quantify worth in sesterces. Much like the vital lifeblood of an empire, intricate networks of transportation ferry individuals across the Republic, all converging on the heart of its ambition. Vessels designed for cargo are crammed with shackled prisoners and hold scarcely adequate for beasts of burden. Overland routes witness endless columns trudging through mountain passes, where their ancestors once pursued game, now bound for vast estates where olive groves demand toil from hands that will never taste the fruits of their labor. Marketplaces, burgeoning in every significant urban center, transform into grim theaters where human dignity perishes daily. Auctioneers extol the virtues of merchandise that once bore proud distinctions in distant lands. Buyers inspect teeth with the scrutiny of horse traders, test musculature as farmers evaluate breeding stock, and discuss lineage with the practiced nonchalance of those who view human beings as mere investment vehicles. The Italian countryside undergoes a profound metamorphosis under the weight of imported labor, evolving into landscapes that would astonish preceding generations. Immense agricultural domains stretch beyond the horizon, their boundaries delineated by watchtowers where overseers remain vigilant against rebellion among laborers who have nothing left to lose. Orderly rows of olive trees, cultivated with geometric precision, supplant the small holdings where citizen soldiers once raised families. These agrarian operations, functioning as vast industrial complexes, are managed on principles that maximize output while minimizing the humanity of their workforce. As dawn breaks, hundreds march to the fields under armed escort, their movements coordinated by supervisors who calculate productivity in terms of quantifiable human effort. Noon offers a brief respite during which laborers exchange hushed tales of their homelands, while guards ensure that rest periods do not impinge upon optimal efficiency. While temples ascend toward the heavens, profound misery festers underground, where workers toil by the dim glow of oil lamps in the frigid stone bowels of marble quarries. Here, where the very air is thick with stone dust and the aroma of sweat, individuals whose only transgression may have been the defense of their villages extract beauty from living rock for masters who never descend into these subterranean hells. The rhythmic percussion of hammers echoes through tunnels, where sudden collapses entomb the unfortunate beneath limestone, destined for patrician villas. Yet, among all the forms of subjugation that define this expanding republic, none capture the Latin imagination quite like armed combatants engaged in mortal duels for the entertainment of the masses. Gladiator schools, microcosms of controlled violence, represent the ultimate transmutation of human despair into commercial spectacle, where the condemned are schooled in the art of dying stylishly. Within these compounds, fortified by high walls to ensure that trained killers cannot escape their ordained fate, choreographed death achieves a sophistication rivaling any legitimate theatrical production. The economics of arena combat meticulously balance instructional expenditures against the revenues generated by public spectacle. Skilled fighters are substantial investments, requiring years of meticulous training to reach maturity. Their preparation consumes considerable resources, including sustenance, medical care, weaponry, and the expertise of seasoned instructors. The understanding that an entertainer's value is intrinsically linked to their technical prowess as much as their courage is paramount. The most esteemed performers command prices that surpass the cost of opulent villas, their worth measured by their capacity to transmute bloodshed into visceral excitement, compelling crowds to return to the amphitheaters repeatedly. Their training is so rigorous that by the time they enter the arena, they stand shoulder to shoulder in skill with Rome's most accomplished warriors. Their daily routines commence before sunrise and persist until sheer exhaustion, honing reflexes that can mean the difference between survival and demise when confronting equally desperate adversaries. Steel practice emphasizes individual technique and tactical acumen, producing combatants adept at navigating the diverse challenges of arena conflict. Among the most esteemed institutions dedicated to this grim art stands the School of Lentulus Batiatus in Capua. This affluent city, where imperial wealth intermingles with Campanian refinement, cultivates an atmosphere of luxury built upon foundations of systemic brutality. Here, in structures that marry the architectural elegance of patrician residences with the formidable security of military fortresses, approximately 200 souls hone an artistry that transforms murder into performance. The clang of wooden swords against practiced shields creates percussive rhythms that reverberate through courtyards where warriors perspire under the critical scrutiny of their instructors. The understanding that survival hinges on the perfection of technique is deeply ingrained. Heavy posts, bearing the indelible marks of countless training sessions, absorb brutal blows, developing the strength and endurance essential for amphitheater combat. Sand-covered training grounds become makeshift stages where future performers rehearse movements that may ultimately secure their lives when facing adversaries of equal skill and desperation. Within these formidable walls, the ethnic diversity of the fighters breeds tensions that mirror the broader conflicts engulfing the expanding republic. Gauls whose fathers once fought against Caesar share accommodations with Germans who harbor bitter memories of defeat at imperial hands. Thracians, whose tribes once roamed freely across the Balkan plains, sleep alongside Syrians, whose cities have fallen to siege engines. Greeks whose intellectual achievements far exceed their captors find themselves grouped with Nubians, whose spear techniques represent martial traditions predating the very founding of Rome. The ongoing Mithridatic Wars leave Italy vulnerable, as the Republic's most formidable legions are engaged in distant Asia, stretching military resources perilously thin. This situation presents opportunities that astute observers are carefully noting for future consideration. Reduced numbers of guards, diminished garrisons, and an empire overextended across multiple fronts simultaneously. Where linguistic barriers impede comprehension, control solidifies, fragmenting any potential opposition and preventing the unity that shared hardship might otherwise forge. Guards fluent in multiple dialects monitor conversations for any hint of burgeoning conspiracies, while exercise regimens that segregate combatants by fighting style preclude the formation of cohesive groups that could threaten the institution's security. And among this collection of the condemned stands a warrior whose very presence hints at a past, rendered irrelevant by his current circumstances, to those who possess his body, if not his spirit. Spartacus bears the scars of a veteran from conflicts that shaped the political landscapes of distant provinces. Yet, the specifics of his past remain meticulously guarded. A Thracian by birth, his knowledge of warfare extends beyond rudimentary arena techniques to encompass strategic thinking. Imperial auxiliary units acquire such proficiency through years of professional service. The circumstances that reduce this experienced soldier to the status of chattel remain shrouded in silence, a protective veil drawn over survivors who prefer to forget rather than recall the choices that led to their present degradation. Some speculate he served the Republic with unwavering loyalty until political shifts rendered his continued service inconvenient. Others suggest he led a resistance against expansionist endeavors until his capture rendered further opposition impossible. What remains beyond dispute, however, is his mastery of military organization, logistics, and tactics. His understanding surpasses anything an ordinary criminal prisoner could possibly possess. The physical conditioning evident in his physique speaks of years spent in professional military service, where survival depended on maintaining peak fighting capability. His musculature is a testament to carrying heavy equipment over vast distances. His reaction times reflect extensive experience with the clash of steel, and his situational awareness indicates a constant evaluation of potential threats. These attributes distinguish him from other captives whose criminal backgrounds offered no systematic preparation for warfare. Leadership qualities manifest in subtle ways, attracting fellow prisoners who recognize innate authority when they encounter it. His capacity to resolve disputes without resorting to violence, to organize work details efficiently, and to sustain morale during the darkest moments of despair marks him as a soul destined to command rather than merely obey. Guards, observing these nascent qualities, prevent him from orchestrating activities that might jeopardize institutional security, yet they cannot extinguish the respect that other captives accord him, a respect earned through competence that transcends the boundaries normally separating the condemned. Strategic thinking, applied to every facet of his confinement, reveals security arrangements and vulnerabilities that less experienced prisoners might overlook. His meticulous assessment of guard rotations, armament storage procedures, and architectural weaknesses creates mental maps, cataloging opportunities that may one day prove pivotal. Exercise sessions, viewed by other captives merely as preparation for the arena, become reconnaissance missions, gathering intelligence about the capabilities and limitations of their captors. For the commander, forging bonds within captivity is an integral part of a larger strategy. He is building a team whose commitment to the mission transcends individual self-interest. Crixus, the Gallic warrior whose animosity toward the Republic burns with an intensity that makes him invaluable despite his impetuous nature, embodies fierce courage, proving decisive when properly guided. When Amaias, whose Germanic heritage provides knowledge of tribal organization and unconventional warfare tactics, offers expertise that complements rather than duplicates his own capabilities. Meanwhile, beyond the walls that confine these warriors in training, the broader institution of bondage undergoes transformations, rendering the system both more profitable and inherently precarious. Economic prosperity derived from conquered territories fuels a demand for luxury goods and specialized services, requiring skilled artisans and educated administrators. Simple agricultural labor, characteristic of earlier forms of bondage, evolves into complex systems that place valuable human property in positions where their knowledge and capabilities render them virtually indispensable to masters who rely on their expertise. The dynamics of the slave market reveal a deliberate strategy of dismantling tribal and ethnic affiliations. Populations are intentionally mixed to forestall organized resistance. Imperial authorities understand that Gauls fighting alongside fellow Gauls present a greater threat than individuals isolated among Germans, Thracians, and Syrians who cannot effectively communicate. As economic conditions shift, urban servitude gives rise to a class of well-educated, capable individuals whose talents often surpass those of their owners. Greek tutors imparting knowledge of philosophy to Latin children. Syrian architects designing edifices that reflect their patrons' sophistication. Egyptian physicians treating ailments that Republican medicine cannot address. All represent investments whose value appreciates with instruction and experience. These educated individuals often enjoy living conditions that surpass those of many free citizens. Yet, comfort cannot compensate for fundamental injustice, nor can it erase the accumulating resentment when talented individuals are compelled to serve masters whose sole claim to dominance rests on the accident of birth or the outcome of military conquest. The psychological tensions arising from the disparity in capability and status create emotional pressures that seek outlets potentially perilous to the stability of the institution. The economic models of arena schools demonstrate the Republic's substantial investment in human property. The most accomplished performers command prices exceeding that of luxury villas, their worth measured by their ability to generate entertainment revenue. This immense financial outlay explains the school's stringent security measures. The loss of trained fighters represents a catastrophic financial blow. Faith-based practices not only offer spiritual solace to the enslaved, but also foster networks of connection that transcend linguistic and ethnic divides. Mystery cults, promising salvation to all believers irrespective of social standing, create communities where both free and unfree individuals share common objectives that supersede legal classifications. Christian congregations meeting in clandestine assemblies to venerate a deity who supposedly judges all souls equally, sow the seeds of human dignity, ideas that directly challenge the philosophical underpinnings of bondage. Historical precedents demonstrating the possibility of successful uprisings serve as inspiration for those who dream of overthrowing oppression. The significant rebellions in Sicily, which necessitated the deployment of legions to quell them, highlight the persistent warfare required to maintain control over conquered territories where resentment simmers. These instances prove that imperial power, however formidable, is not invincible when confronted by the determined resistance of desperate populations. The Second Servile War, a massive uprising that convulsed Sicily barely a generation prior, offers particularly salient lessons. Led by Salvius and Athenion, this revolt demonstrated both the potential for successful rebellion and the ultimate consequences of failure. Salvius illustrated how spiritual authority could be transmuted into political leadership, uniting disparate populations, while Athenion proved that effective leadership could transform desperate individuals into disciplined soldiers capable of challenging legionary formations. The ultimate suppression, achieved only through the full deployment of legions under experienced commanders, underscored both the gravity with which the Republic regarded such threats and the considerable resources required to dismantle organized resistance. The crucifixions that marked the rebellion's conclusion served as stark warnings, demonstrating the brutal vengeance that awaited those who dared to challenge the fundamental structures of imperial society. Yet, the very necessity of such extreme measures revealed an underlying vulnerability beneath the Republic's seemingly invincible facade. If populations, sufficiently desperate and adequately organized, could necessitate the deployment of legions vital for frontier defense, then bondage itself contained the potential for strategically undermining imperial interests. As the final decades of the second century transition toward a crisis that would define the ensuing era, tensions accumulate throughout the Mediterranean world, akin to the pressure building within a volcanic mountain. The Mithridatic Wars, by draining the legion's strength from Italian garrisons, create opportunities that keen observers are diligently noting. The political instability characterizing the late Republic fosters divisions within the ruling class, divisions that sagacious adversaries might exploit when circumstances permit decisive action. Within the arena schools, where the Republic's most dangerous individuals hone their skills in combat under the watchful eyes of guards ensuring their confinement, an awareness grows that conditions may soon present opportunities not seen since the Sicilian Wars. Conversations during breaks explore possibilities ranging from simple escape attempts to audacious schemes aimed at inflicting significant damage upon a system that reduces free souls to the status of performing animals. All that remains is the spark needed to ignite the tinder that has accumulated over generations in the hearts of those who remember freedom and refuse to accept their current degradation as their immutable destiny. The implements are ready, the knowledge to employ them effectively exists, and the desperation that fuels motivation burns with an intensity that grows stronger each day. In Capio's arena school, where 200 of the Republic's most perilous prisoners practice the arts of war under the supervision of guards who believe that walls and chains provide sufficient security, the Thracian studies the weaknesses inherent in systems designed by those who underestimate the resolve of the people they seek to control. A revolution poised to reshape the ancient world awaits only his decision to transform theory into action, to unite the desperate into an army and test the might of the empire against the fury of souls with nothing left to lose save their shackles. In the humble confines of the kitchens of Lentulus Batiatus's school, where the aroma of barley porridge mingles with the sharp, metallic tang of sharpened iron, destiny resides within the most ordinary of implements. Cooking knives, designed to slice bread for evening sustenance, gleam with potential far beyond the intentions of their creators. Meanwhile, carving blades, meant for preparing festive meats, whisper promises of liberation to hands calloused by practice with wooden swords. Here, amidst the rising steam from bubbling cauldrons and the percussive clatter of serving bowls, 70 souls prepare to transform culinary tools into instruments of insurrection. The year 73 before the Common Era dawns upon Capua, unmarked by any celestial omens foretelling the profound transformation about to unfold. Guards patrol their familiar routes with the casual complacency of those who have never encountered a significant challenge to their authority. Instructors arrive for another day of drilling fighters whose spirits they believe are utterly broken by years of systematic dehumanization. The institution's machinery grinds forward with mechanical precision, its operators oblivious to the undercurrents of rage and unwavering determination flowing beneath the surface of apparent submission. Spartacus moves through these morning routines with the calculated deliberation of a general preparing for battle. His assessment of guard positions, armament storage locations, and architectural vulnerabilities has coalesced into a plan whose audacity is matched only by its desperate necessity. The moment approaches when theory must transition into action, when whispered conversations must yield to the clash of steel and the cries of the fallen. The signal arrives not with the fanfare of trumpets or the roar of battle cries, but with a simple gesture that unleashes the fury accumulated over months of meticulous preparation. Kitchen implements, seized with swift efficiency, become weapons in hands trained to kill, their edges finding flesh with a precision that speaks of professional military experience. Guards who, moments before stood in assured authority, now confront adversaries whose desperation renders them more formidable than wild beasts. Blood stains the stone floors where feet have trod for generations in patterns of submission and obedience. The initial casualties fall not to the thrust of a gladius or the arc of a spear, but to carving knives wielded with surgical accuracy by fighters who understand that their first moments of combat will determine whether they achieve freedom or face the ignominious fate of crucifixion. Each fallen guard represents not merely a tactical victory, but a psychological liberation from the debilitating bonds of assumed helplessness. The training facility, housing the school's array of practice implements, transforms into the insurgents' initial strategic objective. Within its walls, wooden swords and dulled lances yield to honed blades capable of cleaving through armor and flesh with equal ease. Shields meant to withstand simulated impacts now serve to deflect lethal assaults. Implements of staged combat morph into instruments of genuine warfare. Beyond the enclosed grounds, supply convoys en route with their customary provisions of sustenance and military equipment encounter determined combatants instead of compliant captives. The interception of these wagons grants the escapees their inaugural taste of actual combat accoutrements. Gladius swords, their edges glinting with the promise of effective termination. Mail shirts designed to parry hostile blades. Helmets offering defense against the crushing force of maces and clubs. The strategic allocation of acquired gear showcases the military acumen that distinguishes this revolt from common prison disturbances. Seasoned individuals gain preferential access to superior weaponry and defensive articles. Their experience positions them as natural squad leaders for comrades whose bravery surpasses their tactical understanding. Germanic peoples, possessing prior experience in unconventional combat, are outfitted with tools aligning with their preferred fighting methods. Gauls, whose animosity towards Rome burns most fiercely, are assigned roles that direct their ferocity toward maximal strategic efficacy. The prison break itself unfolds with a level of precision that astonishes surviving guards. Rather than scattering in disarray, as typical escaped prisoners would, the revolutionaries advance in cohesive units, providing mutual cover during their retreat while neutralizing potential pursuers. Rearguard actions, designed to safeguard the main body, exhibit tactical sophistication, transforming a desperate flight into a professional military withdrawal. Mount Vuvius, that dormant titan whose volcanic flanks offer sanctuary to those intrepid enough to seek refuge in its shadow, becomes the destination for this improbable army. The volcanic terrain provides natural defenses, amplifying the protective capabilities of units too small to engage Republican legions in open confrontation. Narrow ravines channel approaching adversaries into kill zones. Caverns offer respite from both environmental elements and projectile assaults. Freshwater sources ensure the insurgents will not succumb to thirst during prolonged encampments. All these advantages draw the fugitives toward their new bastion. The journey toward these elevated positions demonstrates both the physical conditioning imparted by gladiator school regimens and the strategic foresight guiding their movements. Pathways winding through terrain, too precipitous and broken for cavalry operations, become routes to safety for fighters accustomed to traveling on foot. Vantage points affording commanding views of approaching enemies while remaining concealed from casual observation furnish ideal bases for the guerrilla campaign that circumstances will necessitate. The strategic benefit of Vuvius becomes evident as the initial Roman response units arrive to investigate reports of the escape. The mountain's volcanic topography presents numerous avenues of egress, preventing encirclement, while providing elevated positions from which small contingents can harass much larger formations. Natural passageways that channel advancing troops into pre-established kill zones permit the revolutionaries to maximize the effectiveness of their limited numbers against professional military units. Early recruitment initiatives, expanding the contingent beyond its original nucleus, reveal the widespread discontent simmering throughout the region's enslaved populace. Agricultural laborers, who have spent years yearning for liberty, arrive in groups. Their familiarity with the local landscape and supply routes proves as valuable as the added combat strength they contribute. Shepherds whose nomadic lifestyles have instilled in them the ability to traverse challenging terrain swiftly bring skills that transform the escapees from static defenders into a mobile force capable of striking targets across Campania. The rapidity with which their numbers swell astonishes even the most optimistic among the initial combatants. What commences as 70 desperate souls evolves within days into a unit numbering in the hundreds, then thousands, as word of the revolt disseminates through communities that have awaited such an occasion for generations. Deserters from Roman auxiliary detachments, criminals evading justice, and free citizens whose predicaments have become untenable all converge on the volcanic slopes where rebellion assumes tangible form. Within this burgeoning encampment, leadership structures emerge, reflecting both the realities of command and the varied origins of those who have joined the cause. Spartacus assumes overall leadership through a combination of demonstrated proficiency and innate authority that transcends ethnic and linguistic divisions. Crixus leads the Gallic contingent, his staunch allegiance to the cause tempered by tactical impetuosity that requires careful oversight. Oenomaus commands the Germanic elements, whose ancestral fighting traditions complement rather than conflict with more conventional military approaches. The selection of these leaders occurs not through formal political processes, but through the organic acknowledgement of merit, characteristic of military organizations under extreme duress. Warriors who have risked everything for freedom choose commanders based on their capacity to ensure their survival and achieve victory in battles, rather than inherited rights or oratorical prowess. The democratic element in these choices mirrors the values that will define the rebellion throughout its existence. Initial Roman responses reflect the complacency fostered among authorities who have never faced significant challenges to their control over enslaved populations. Local magistrates regard the outbreak as a minor disruption, necessitating only militia forces to restore order. Their perception of the situation is shaped by assumptions regarding the inherent inferiority of those in bondage. The small detachment dispatched under Gaius Claudius Glaber embodies this casual approach to what will prove to be the Republic's most perilous internal crisis. Glaber's expedition approaches the volcanic stronghold with the confidence of professional soldiers who have never doubted their superiority over desperate amateurs. His troops, equipped with standard government military hardware and trained in conventional tactics, anticipate overwhelming revolutionary positions through straightforward applications of superior discipline and equipment. The prospect of an easy triumph over escaped slaves promises both military renown and valuable combat experience for soldiers who have seen little action against formidable adversaries. The ambush that annihilates this Roman contingent demonstrates tactical innovations that exploit both terrain advantages and enemy overconfidence, rather than defending fixed positions that would permit attackers to concentrate their strength. The insurgents employ mobility, keeping government formations off balance while maximizing damage from hit-and-run assaults. The escape from Vuvius becomes a masterpiece of unconventional warfare, transforming perceived encirclement into devastating counterattack. When Roman soldiers position themselves to seal off the obvious routes down the mountain, they create precisely the conditions Spartacus intended to exploit. The seemingly insurmountable cliff face, which appears to trap the revolutionaries, becomes instead their egress as combatants descend the sheer rock using vine ropes, the preparation of which demonstrates the foresight that differentiates this uprising from ordinary prison revolts. The descent demands courage bordering on recklessness, yet provides access to positions from which they can strike the government's rear with complete surprise. Attacking from behind transforms the tactical scenario from siege to slaughter. As Roman soldiers find themselves caught between steep volcanic slopes and an enemy that seems to have materialized from the very rocks. Formations designed for conventional battlefield engagements prove ineffective against opponents who emerge from concealment to strike with the fury of those with nothing left to lose. The disciplined ranks, representing governmental military pride, dissolve into chaos as individual soldiers struggle to survive against adversaries who attack from all directions simultaneously. The destruction of Glaber's force sends reverberations through the Roman establishment, extending far beyond immediate military consequences. Reports of the defeat filtering back